the 20-some years since he graduated college, our first reader has been a PR professional, a journalist, the editor and publisher of Gaper's Blog, figure out who this is, a professional blogger for corporate clients, and host of 20 by 2 Chicago, a show in which 20 interesting people have 2 minutes each to answer one question. He's also co-host of Tuesday Funk, the best series. I just added that in here. Anyway, where he's normally known for his topical haiku. He lives in Chicago's West Ridge neighborhood with his wife and 3 cats, and is currently trying his hand at writing fiction. Put your hands together for Andrew Huff!
Thanks, Eden. Okay, so I've spent a lot of time writing nonfiction as a journalist, and after I shut down Gaper's Block, an idea came to me that I felt like I needed to tackle. And it was sort of, I started out thinking about, well, zombies can't really exist, but what if they could? What would they be? And it's kind of right there in front of us. If you think about, people who don't really have a mind, or their own thoughts, but can still move around and travel around, not like communicable zombie disease, but like people who have neurodegenerative diseases are very similar to at least the sort of baseline concept for zombies. So it's like, wow, well, so in our future, we could have a situation where medicine has solved a lot of diseases through gene therapy and assistive devices, but maybe hasn't solved the mystery of the mind. And so that's the world in which I'm writing. We might actually, in that world, call people who are mindless walking around in the world zombies. So zombies appear in this book, but they're not like flesh-eating or anything like that. And so this is basically just set in a world in which people have reached supercentenarianism quite often. They're well over 100 years old and have various devices and medicines that are helping them live beyond that. And what might happen what might the world be like, and also what might happen if you lose access to that for a number of reasons. So, John Crowninshield wasn't usually out this late on a Thursday, but Friday was Mark Leopold's last day at Renucleon's Boston office, and for a variety of reasons, the goodbye party was scheduled for the night before. John found himself at Benson's Tavern at 12:30 a.m. on his 5th gin and tonic, blearily listening as Ted Delano retold his favorite fish-out-of-water story about Mark to the assembled members of the Renucleon consumer marketing staff. So there he was, this prim and proper Swiss asshole, getting lectured on the finer points of secure off-blockchain investments by this kid. You can just see it on Mark's face. He's thinking, yes, very good. My country only invented that centuries ago. Ted's impression of Mark's Alpine accent got more laughs than it should have, considering how many times this crowd had heard it. But Mark's bashfulness encouraged it. His ears were now beet red, and he was smiling dopily, being a good sport, but probably secretly glad he'd only have to endure this story once a year at conventions now that he was heading back to Geneva. John flagged the bartender and ordered Mark another Macallan. As he waited, Shanna Jackson sidled up to the bar next to him, her slender mahogany arm dangling a wine glass for the bartender to refill. "How does it feel to see your friend and benefactor flying away, John?" she asked with a smirk and a twinkle in her eye. Was she flirting, or was she just trying to get a rise out of him? He winced a little at the question's pointedness, but took it as an opportunity to flirt back a little, just in case. "My hip's going to hurt for a while from the separation, but it's nothing a little soparoxen and some recreational yoga can't fix," he replied. "Care to join me?" Shanna raised an eyebrow, and the smirk turned into a smile. "We'll see," she said, and pivoted back to the party. "Too bad it's a school night. Some of these folks are going to be in rough shape tomorrow, hydroflux or no." John turned around to join her in surveying the scene. Ted had now cornered a couple of the young product reps and was regaling them with stories of his years on the road. Mark, looking relieved to no longer be at the brunt of Ted's attention, chatted with his admin, Beth, and several other support staffers. Ken Cho and Dennis McLean were once again arguing about soccer, and Rella and Jin had found a table in the back to sneak off to. John slipped his hand behind Shanna and touched the small of her back, and finding there the unmistakable ridge of a spinal implant. Perhaps she was older than he thought. Though that prospect didn't bother him, after all, he looked much younger than 118 himself, thanks to the access to rejuvenative procedures and pharmaceuticals that working for Renucleon afforded. Shall we join those two lovebirds? He asked, nodding to Rella and Jen. Sorry, not tonight, Shanna replied sweetly, leaning into him for a moment before straightening up and stepping forward, breaking John's connection to her back. Like I said, it's too bad it's a school night, she said over her shoulder as she started to pick her way back through the bar. See you in the office. John sighed and picked up his fresh gin and tonic and the scotch for Mark and headed back to the group. Outside, on the street, a crumpled figure shambled along the darkened sidewalk. A couple stepped out of Benson's, giggling and leaning into each other, then stopped short at the sight in front of him. They quickly crossed the street as this disheveled man advanced toward the tavern, drawn by the light. His left arm dangled limp at his side, while his right reached out in front of him, grasping for whatever might be there. The hand scraped at the windows as the man staggered along the bar's facade, blindingly looking for the door. Inside, not a single soul paid attention. It was 8:30 a.m., and John's apartment culminated its gentle wake-up routine by undimming the windows and silencing the white noise machine, which allowed the quiet hum of the city to once again penetrate the bedroom. Precisely 5 minutes later, no motion or changes in breathing detected, the scent of freshly ground coffee was released into the air, and John showed signs of life. Rolling onto his back, he thought to himself, what day is it? And tried to remember what he was doing last night. Ah, yes, Friday, he thought as fragments returned to him. Dinner at the club, drinks at the tavern, black car back home, nightcap alone, pills. Tonight, typical night, part of the routine, but a day early. And now Friday, but it felt like Monday. What was that song from the oldies stream? Tell me why I don't like Mondays? John thought as he headed into the bathroom. He tapped behind his right ear, and the information icon materialized in the lower right corner of his vision, pulsed as the last few seconds of neural data were retrieved, and GI informed him that the Boomtown Rats released that song in 1979 and offered the option to learn more about the band, learn more about 1979, learn more about New Wave, or stream the song either in-head or on the G-Home speakers. John flicked his eyes up and blinked, and GI was dismissed. He turned the shower on. The car drove through the crowded streets so smoothly that John didn't even notice the zombies as he sped past, his Audi A4D picking its own way through the unpredictable mix of people staggering into the street on their way to whatever what was left of their minds told them they should be. Our vehicles did a similar dance, communicating silently with each other about their own position and the trajectory, as well as those of the humans around them. The data, if run through a visualization program, might look like honeybees in a hive, each machine weaving its way through its brethren in a dance of directions to the location of a flower garden. John's mind was elsewhere. He barely looked up from his tablet, reviewing the latest clinical trial data for the new candidate Renucleon was hoping to release next year. The results looked good, very good actually, with significant improvement over Rexulin in stage 4 neural atrophy patients. His concentration was briefly interrupted when a zombie stepped off the curb just as the A4D passed. The muffled thud startled John, and it took a moment for him to refocus on his charts, flipping to the adverse events section as the car notified him via GI that no damage had been incurred. The A4D glided toward the Renucleon corporate compound, while the zombie, who'd barely registered the encounter himself, continued on his way to the boarded-up office building where his long-closed accounting firm had been. The car dropped John off, and Ted Delano met him in the lobby. John felt his mind begin to wander. This worried him. The boardroom snapped back to sharpness as he pulled his focus back to the meeting, to the slide presentation floating in front of him. Back to the nameless intern from marketing who was still narrating the demographic data John had already digested from the shimmering 3D pie charts. He glanced around the table to see if anyone had noticed. They all seemed to have their gaze fixated on the displays in front of them, except possibly Shanna, seated directly across from him. Had her eyes just refocused now, or was he imagining it? He wasn't quite sure. But now that John was staring at her, she arched her eyebrow quizzically. He shifted in his seat and broke eye contact. Under the table, John quietly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small case, opened it, and felt for the familiar pentagonal shape of Rexulon. Gripping the pill with his fingertips, he returned the case to his pocket and pushed his chair back. As nonchalantly as he could, he got up and walked to the credenza, pretending to listen to the intern as he poured a glass of water. With a glance toward Shanna, he quickly popped the Rexulon into his mouth and headed back to his seat, taking a casual sip before putting the glass down. It seemed like the coast was clear. The meeting broke up 15 minutes later, and John headed back to his office. Shanna followed him. "Are you feeling okay, John?" she asked as she hung at his doorframe. John feigned a surprised look as he rounded the end of his desk. "Of course," he had scoffed. "I'm just a little tired from last night. My Rexulon prescription must have reached a half-life a little early." Shanna frowned. "Better get that renewed then. How would it look for a high-profile executive in an international pharma company to be taking expired drugs?" She gave him a wink and continued to her office. Shanna hadn't been the only one in the meeting who noticed John's slip. The unblinking eyes of the HR cams, embedded in the ceiling, walls, and work screens throughout the office, fed a constant stream of raw video to the central server cyclone for rapid analysis. Any anomalies were flagged for human review and evaluation. Although his surreptitious pill pop hadn't registered, John's lapse of attention in the meeting was caught and considered by an HR analyst, then added to his file, which was beginning to contain enough anomalies to constitute a pattern. The rest of the day was uneventful. The pentagonal focus sharpener doing its job on John's system, and he locked down his workstation right at 4. The weekend beckoned, and although it was not without its own set of demands and responsibilities, for now, John's attention was on the night ahead. He headed down to the lobby level of the sprawling office complex, chatting with colleagues on the maglev, nodding and waving to friends and colleagues across the gleaming white atrium as they all headed out to meet their vehicles, which were timing their arrival to match the geo-tracking feed from their owner's GI implants. From above it, it looked like an elaborate dance. Car meets owner, door already swinging open. Owner gets in, door swings down, and away they go. It's so well timed that the cars almost don't need to stop, only slow to a crawl at the right moment, except when human nature interferes and two people come together to talk curbside. Such moments throw the vehicle's control centers into turmoil, weighing the importance of arriving on time against the vehicular proximity rules and traffic patterns. Jams have been known to happen. Fortunately, such occasions are rare thanks to years of evolving etiquette around this transportation ritual. John met his car at the curb and slipped in. He sat back and rubbed his eyes as he said, "Home." The A4D's control screen pulsed in confirmation, but John didn't see it. He laid back with his eyes closed, ready for the weekend. The car's sensors noted the occupant's status and adjusted the route to ensure as smooth of a ride as possible. Thanks.